My name is Renee Caldwell. I was 31 years old when my stepfather looked my daughter in the eye at the dinner table and told her that some children are just naturally more capable than others. My daughter was 10. My son was 8. They were sitting 3 feet apart at the same table, eating the same meal, and he said it like it was science. Like it was a thing you could measure and file and move on from. My son smiled. My daughter put down her fork and looked at her plate. That was in October. By March, her grades had dropped 2 full-letter grades in every subject. By April, she had stopped speaking at dinner entirely. By May, I was sitting in a family court waiting room in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, with a manila folder thick enough to stop a door. And my mother was 3 states away explaining to a CPS investigator why she hadn't noticed. She had noticed, she just hadn't said anything. There is a difference between those two things that took me a long time to understand and a much shorter time to document. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where we share real stories about the moments that test your family and the quiet strength it takes to protect the people you love most. If this story speaks to you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I enlisted at 20 because I was practical and I was broke, and because the Army offered me something my hometown in rural Georgia did not. A clear set of rules, a clear path forward, and people who would tell you exactly where you stood at all times. I thrived in that environment. I made sergeant by 26. Logistics. Supply chain management for a forward support company. I was good at tracking things, at knowing where every piece of equipment was at every moment, at making sure the right resources reached the right people at the right time. I was less good at tracking what was happening inside my own house when I wasn't in it. My children's father, Jerome, was a good man who made one bad decision that compounded into several. He got involved with people he shouldn't have when I was on my first deployment. And by the time I came home, the legal system had made a decision about his immediate future that neither of us could appeal. He went in when Destiny was 4 and Marcus was 2. He was scheduled for release the spring after my second deployment. We had stayed in contact. We were doing the slow work of rebuilding something, but he wasn't available for the family care plan. And that changed everything. My mother, Sandra Watkins, volunteered 2 days after I got the deployment orders. She called on a Sunday evening while I was making dinner, her voice already in the specific register she used when she had already decided something and was presenting it as a conversation. You know your children should be with family. Send them to me. I stood at the stove and stirred pasta and thought about it. My mother lived in a 4-bedroom house in Fayetteville, North Carolina, 40 minutes from base. She had raised 3 children. She was retired from the post office, so her schedule was flexible. She had a yard. She had a neighborhood with sidewalks and a school district with decent ratings. She also had Raymond. Raymond Watkins had married my mother when I was 17. He was not a cruel man. He was not a warm man either. He occupied a precise middle space that I'd spent 15 years trying to name. He was fair in the sense that he applied his standards consistently. He just didn't apply them equally. Raymond had a son from his first marriage. Devin, 29, lived in Charlotte, worked in finance, called every Sunday. Devin had 2 kids. Twin boys, 8 years old, who visited every other month and stayed in the blue bedroom with the bunk beds and the brand new Xbox that Raymond had bought specifically for their visits. My children had visited my mother's house for holidays and occasional weekends for years. They had the guest room, the one with the full-size bed they shared, and the ceiling fan that clicked on every 3rd rotation. I told myself it would be different when they were there full-time. I was wrong about that in the specific way that you're wrong when you already suspect the truth, but choose the more convenient interpretation, because the alternative requires action you're not yet ready to take. I signed the family care plan. I set up a $1,000 monthly transfer to my mother's checking account. I drove Destiny and Marcus to Fayetteville on a Tuesday morning in September with 2 suitcases, their backpacks, and a card I had clipped to the inside pocket of each bag. Military dependent ID, their photos, my name, emergency contact on the back. The night before I left, I sat on the edge of Destiny's bed. What if I don't like it there? She asked. You can tell me anything. Every week when I call, you tell me everything. The good and the hard. Deal? She considered this seriously. Destiny always considered things seriously. She had her father's jaw and my habit of not speaking until she had something worth saying. Deal, she said. And if anything feels wrong, really wrong, what do you do? She patted the front pocket of her backpack where the card was clipped. Show this to an adult and they call you. That's right. She was quiet for a moment. What kind of wrong? Any kind, I said. If it feels wrong to you, it's worth telling me about. She nodded once, the way she did when she was putting information somewhere she intended to keep it. I kissed her forehead. I kissed Marcus on the top of his head while he slept. I drove back to base and finished packing my footlocker. The deployment was in 72 hours. I kept my Sunday calls. My children did not. The first call from Fayetteville felt fine. Marcus talked for 12 minutes about a kid at school who could fit a whole orange in his mouth. Destiny told me about a book she was reading. My mother hovered at the edge of the frame, smiling. By the second call, something had shifted. Marcus was still Marcus. He talked and bounced and interrupted himself to show me a drawing he'd done. But Destiny sat with her arms folded, and her answers clipped to the length of sentences you'd use with a stranger. How's school? Fine. How's your teacher? She's okay. Are you making friends? Some. I tried reaching past the camera through pure persistence. Tell me about one thing that happened this week. One specific thing. She thought about it. We did a science project about ecosystems. What kind? Wetlands. Was it interesting? She looked somewhere past the screen for a moment. Grandpa said Marcus is a natural at science and I'm better suited to reading. I kept my voice even. What do you think? She shrugged. I like science. Then you like science, that's what matters. She didn't look convinced, and I noticed for the first time that my mother was not in the frame during this exchange. She was somewhere behind the camera, just out of view, silent. I wrote the date in my green notebook that night and the exact words Raymond had said. Word for word. Not because I knew yet what I was building. Just because something in my chest said write it down. The school had a parent portal. I checked it every morning before my shift. Marcus Caldwell, current GPA 3.4. Attendance, perfect. Teacher notes. Enthusiastic, participates well, strong in math and science. Destiny Caldwell, current GPA 3.1. Attendance, perfect. Teacher notes. Quiet, works independently, strong reading comprehension. Comparable, solid, fine. By November, Destiny's GPA had dropped to 2.6. Her teacher notes had changed too, has become more withdrawn, less engaged in class discussion, some difficulty concentrating during group work. I called the school directly, asked to speak with Destiny's teacher, a woman named Miss Briggs. Miss Briggs had a careful, professional voice, the kind that told me she'd had this conversation before and was choosing her words with intention. Destiny is a bright girl. She's not struggling with the material. It's more that she seems to be struggling with something that's making it harder to access what she knows. Can you be more specific? She used to volunteer answers. She was one of my most engaged students in September. Now she waits to be called on, and when she is, she second-guesses herself. She'll give an answer and then immediately walk it back, like she's waiting for someone to tell her she's wrong. Has anything happened at school? Nothing I've observed, but I think this shift is coming from somewhere outside school. I thanked her. I called my mother that evening. Is everything okay with Destiny? Her grades are dropping. My mother's voice shifted into the register I recognized from childhood. The one that meant a defense was already prepared. She's adjusting, Renee. It's a lot of change for a child. She was fine in September. Miss Briggs says she's second-guessing herself in class. Destiny has always been sensitive, you know that. What does Raymond say to her at home? A pause. Raymond is very encouraging. Mom, he pushes them to do their best, that's all. Does he push them the same way? Silence, the specific silence that is itself an answer. Mom, Marcus takes to Raymond's style better. That's just personality, Renee, it's not a judgment. I wrote that down too. The care package arrived on a Thursday. Brown paper, my mother's handwriting on the label. Inside, a jar of peach preserves, a photo of Marcus at a school science fair, a folded piece of paper. I opened the paper on my bunk, Destiny's handwriting. A list. She had always made lists when she was working something out. I'd been watching her do it since she was 6. At the top, things I am good at, she had started the list. Then she had crossed out every item. Reading, crossed out. Drawing, crossed out. Taking care of Marcus, crossed out. Science, crossed out. At the bottom, in smaller letters like a question she wasn't sure was allowed, is there anything? I sat on that bunk for a long time. Then I went to the comm station and called my mother's house at 300 my time. I didn't care what time it was in Fayetteville. Raymond answered. Which meant he was still up, which meant it wasn't as late as I'd calculated. Raymond, I need to talk to you about Destiny. She's fine, Renee. She sent me a list of things she's good at and crossed every one of them out. A pause. Kids do that, they're self-critical. She crossed out reading. Destiny has been reading above grade level since 2nd grade. What has been said to her about reading? I told her that reading is a passive skill. That it's a foundation, not an achievement. I was trying to push her toward more active academic engagement. She's 10 years old, Raymond. I gave Marcus the same feedback. Did you? He didn't answer that. Raymond, I need you to understand something. Destiny is listening to everything you say about her. Every word. She is filing it and building her understanding of herself from it. And what she is currently building is a list of things she believes she is not good at. I'll talk to her. I'd like to talk to her, tonight, alone, without anyone else in the room. Another pause. Connie's already asleep. I'll call back in 5 minutes. Please get Destiny. He got her. I talked to my daughter for 47 minutes. She sat on the back porch of my mother's house in October at 11 at night with a blanket around her shoulders and talked to me for 47 minutes. She told me about the science fair. About how Raymond had helped Marcus build a circuit board project for 2 weekends in a row and hadn't offered to help her with her ecosystem poster. About how at dinner, when Marcus answered a question right, Raymond said good man, and when she answered a question right, he said and moved on. About how Marcus got to stay up until 9 on school nights and she had to be in her room by 8. She said it all in the careful, factual tone she used when she had been holding things for a long time and was relieved to finally set them down somewhere. Why didn't you tell me before? I asked. I thought maybe I was being sensitive, she said. Grandma said I was being sensitive. I closed my eyes. The desert air sat on my face like a dry hand. You are not being sensitive, you are being accurate. There is a difference. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that went into my green notebook in capital letters. Marcus doesn't even notice, Mom. He just thinks that's how it is. That was the line. That was when I understood that the harm wasn't coming from malice. It was coming from an invisible architecture that my son couldn't see because he was on the inside of it, and my daughter couldn't escape because she was on the outside. I called Captain Diana Flores the next morning, JAG officer at Fort Bragg. We had served together 2 years earlier. She answered on the second ring. Flores, I need legal advice. My family care plan is in place and I have concerns about differential treatment of my daughter. I need to know my options. Document everything. Dates, direct quotes, behavioral changes, school records. If this escalates, you want a paper trail that predates the incident. There hasn't been an incident. Then you're still ahead of it. Stay there. I spent the next 6 weeks building a file. I called Miss Briggs every 2 weeks. She kept notes of our conversations at my request and emailed them to my military address. I called the school counselor, Mr. Ockafer, and explained the situation. He began meeting with Destiny weekly. He sent me brief summaries after each session. Not full transcripts, just observations. She seems to be carrying a belief that she is less capable than her brother. She responds well to direct affirmation. She has started to separate her self-worth from her performance, which is progress. I saved every text from my mother, every voicemail from Raymond, every photo that came through, noting who was in them and who wasn't. 3 photos of Marcus at Raymond's workbench in the garage. 0 photos of Destiny at the workbench or anywhere near Raymond doing anything. I requested a copy of both children's school pickup logs. Marcus and Destiny were both picked up at 3:15 daily. Equal there. I noted it in the file anyway. I checked Raymond's son Devin's Instagram once, the weekend his twins visited. 12 photos over 2 days. Raymond in the garage with 3 boys, Marcus and the twins. Grilling in the backyard with 3 boys. A football game on television with 3 boys on the couch, a bowl of popcorn in the center. Destiny appeared in 1 photo. Standing at the kitchen counter beside my mother, both of them facing away from the camera, doing something at the sink. I saved it to the folder. I noted the date. My reassignment request went up the chain in December. My commanding officer, Sergeant Major Torres, read it in her office with the door closed and then looked at me over her reading glasses. Caldwell, is your daughter in danger? Not physical danger, but she's being harmed, ma'am. I can document it. She looked at the 2-page request, then she signed it. Handle your family, come back to me ready to work. Yes, ma'am. The reassignment came through in February. I was going home. I landed at Raleigh-Durham on a Thursday morning. I rented a car. I drove to a Marriott 11 minutes from my mother's house. I did not call ahead. I called Flores from the hotel room. I'm stateside. Family care plan revocation is drafted. I can file Friday morning. What's your read on the situation? The kids are physically fine, but Destiny's grades have dropped significantly, and her counselor has documented behavioral changes consistent with repeated invalidation. That's our language for the filing. Emotional neglect by differential treatment. It's harder to prove than physical neglect, but we have 6 months of documented evidence. What do I do tonight? Nothing. Go to the school tomorrow. Talk to the counselor. Let me file Friday. Then you go get your kids. I sat on the hotel bed and looked at the ceiling. 11 minutes away. My daughter was 11 minutes away, in a house where she crossed things off lists because she had started to believe she didn't belong on them. I made myself stay in the hotel room. I drove to the school the next morning at 8:30. Mr. Ockafer met me in his office with a folder on his desk and the expression of a man who had been hoping for this meeting for months. I'm glad you're here, he said, and he meant it in a way that made my chest tight. He opened the folder. Destiny's session notes, 12 weeks of them. In September, she had described her home life neutrally. In October, she had started using phrases like I'm not really the smart one and Marcus is the one Raymond pays attention to. By December, she was asking Ockafer directly, is it possible that some kids are just less capable than others? Ockafer had written in his notes, in careful clinical language. Student appears to be internalizing external messaging regarding comparative capability. Recommend family environment evaluation. He had sent that recommendation to my mother in November. My mother had responded with a brief email saying that Destiny was adjusting and that the family appreciated his attention. He had saved the email. He gave me a printed copy. Miss Briggs brought in a folder of her own. 6 months of grade records. In September, Destiny was performing at the same level as Marcus in math, slightly above in reading and writing, slightly below in science. By February, Marcus's grades had held steady. Destiny's had dropped across every subject except reading, which had dropped only slightly, as if some stubborn part of her was protecting the one thing Raymond had specifically dismissed as passive. I photographed everything. Then I sat in my rental car in the school parking lot and built the email to Flores. Subject line, evidence package custody transfer Caldwell dependents, 6 months of documentation, school records, counselor notes, text messages, photos with dates and absences noted, Miss Briggs's observations, Ockafer's recommendation letter, and my mother's dismissive response. The photo of Destiny standing at the sink facing away from the camera while the boys watched football. And Destiny's list, the one with everything crossed out. I had scanned it back in October and kept it in the folder since then. I sent it all and started the car. That afternoon, I parked on the street half a block from my mother's house. 3:15, Raymond's truck pulled into the driveway. Marcus climbed out first. Raymond carried his backpack to the door, unlocked it himself, held it open, said something over his shoulder that made Marcus laugh. 3:15. Destiny climbed out behind them. She adjusted her own backpack straps. She followed them inside. She didn't need to ring the bell. But I watched her walk through that door, and I watched the door close, and I watched the window where, 30 seconds later, Marcus appeared on the couch with Raymond, and the television came on. And I watched the other window upstairs where a light came on in the guest room. Destiny's corner of the house. Separate, quiet, up the stairs and away from the noise. I sat in my car until my hands stopped shaking. Then I called Flores. File it in the morning. Already set, 9 a.m. Flores, what if she internalizes this permanently? What if we get her out but the damage is already done? She was quiet for a moment. Renee, you have Ockafer, you have Briggs. You have documentation and you have yourself. Kids are resilient when the right people show up consistently. You're showing up. I should have shown up sooner. You showed up as soon as you knew, that's what matters. I did not wait for the filing. Not because I panicked. Because Destiny called me. She called my personal cell at 7:45 on Thursday evening. Her voice was flat and careful in the specific way that told me she had been holding something all day and had finally decided to set it down. Mom, I'm here, baby. What's going on? Raymond told Marcus tonight that he's going to help him apply for the summer STEM program at the community college, the one for middle schoolers. Okay. I asked if I could apply too. I held the phone tighter. Raymond said the program is competitive and he didn't want me to be disappointed if I didn't get in. He said maybe next year. What did your grandmother say? She said Raymond knows best about these things. Silence. The thick, steady kind. Destiny, I need you to do something for me. Okay. I need you to look in the front pocket of your backpack. A rustling sound, then quiet. The card, she said. That card means you belong to me. No matter how far I am, and I need you to know that right now I am not far at all. Another silence, then very quietly, how not far? 11 minutes, I heard her breathe. Mom, are you coming to get us? Tomorrow morning. I need you to sleep tonight and I will be there tomorrow morning before school. Can you do that? Yes. Is Marcus okay? Marcus is fine. Marcus is always fine. She said it without bitterness, just fact. The kind of fact that costs something to say out loud. I know, baby, that's part of what we're going to fix. I hung up and called Floris. She called me, I want to go tonight. Renee, I know, I'm not going tonight. But I want the filing first thing. 9 a.m. is too late. Is there anything earlier? A pause. I can have the emergency pickup authorization signed by 7:30. The family court judge owes me a professional courtesy. Do it. Renee, go to sleep. I didn't sleep. I sat in the hotel room and read through the entire documentation file from beginning to end. 6 months of evidence. Every date, every quote, every grade report, every photo with an absence where my daughter should have been. Then I read Destiny's list one more time, the one with everything crossed out. At the bottom, in letters smaller than the rest. Is there anything? I took out a piece of paper and wrote back to her. Yes, here is what you are good at, telling the truth. Paying attention. Protecting your brother. Waiting for people to catch up to what you already know. Being exactly who you are in rooms that made that hard. I folded it and put it in my jacket pocket. I arrived at my mother's house at 7:50 on a Friday morning. I knocked. My mother opened the door. She was in her robe with her coffee. Her face did the thing faces do when they see something they were expecting but hoping wouldn't come. Renee, good morning, Mom. I need to get the kids ready for school. You're back. When did you? I got in yesterday. May I come in? She stepped back. I walked through the door. Raymond was at the kitchen table with the newspaper. He looked up. His expression moved through several things in quick succession. Surprise, reassessment, and then the careful neutral that men use when they know they are in a situation that requires them to be strategic. Renee, he said, we didn't know you were coming. I know. I set my keys on the counter. I'd like a few minutes with the kids before school. Is Destiny upstairs? My mother and Raymond exchanged a look. The kind of look that has an entire conversation in it. She's getting ready, my mother said. I went upstairs. Destiny was sitting on the edge of the shared bed, already dressed, backpack beside her, waiting. She looked up when she heard my footsteps and went very still. Then she stood up and walked to me and put her arms around my waist without saying anything. I held on. Marcus appeared in the doorway in his socks, shirt untucked, holding a piece of toast. Mom? He looked at me like I was a math problem he hadn't studied for. Then his face broke open. Mom! He crossed the room at full speed. I caught both of them. We stood there for a moment, the three of us, in the guest room with the clicking ceiling fan and the one shared bed, and I let them feel that I was real. Then I straightened up. Get your stuff. I'm taking you to school. Are we coming back here after? Marcus asked. I looked at Destiny. She was watching me with that serious, accurate expression. No, I said, we're not. I drove them to school. I walked them inside. I signed them in at the office and asked to speak with Mr. Ockheffer. He came to the lobby, saw me, and extended his hand. Miss Caldwell, I'm very glad you're here. Thank you for everything you documented. It mattered. He nodded. How are they? I looked at Destiny through the glass window of the counselor's office. She was sitting in a chair with her backpack in her lap, watching me talk. They're going to be okay, I said. I just need to make sure the people around them believe that. He understood what I meant. I'll have everything ready for the filing. The CPS intake happened that afternoon. The investigator was a woman named Miss Jerome, sturdy and efficient, with a clipboard and the specific patience of someone who had stopped being surprised by anything. She interviewed my mother and Raymond separately. Raymond's version. He had always treated both children fairly. He had high standards and applied them equally. If Destiny felt differently, that was a perception issue, not a behavior issue. My mother's version, Raymond meant well. Destiny was sensitive. They had done their best with the resources they had. Miss Jerome noted the word sensitive. She had heard it twice in 2 interviews. She wrote it down and underlined it. Then she reviewed the documentation I had provided. 6 months of it. Grade reports showing a consistent decline in one child with no corresponding decline in the other. Same household, same school, same time period. Counselor notes documenting Destiny's internalized messaging. My mother's dismissive email response to Ockheffer's formal recommendation. The photographs. The list with everything crossed out. She called me that evening. Miss Caldwell, I want to be clear about what I'm seeing here. This isn't a case of physical harm. But what I have in front of me is documented evidence of a child who entered this household performing at grade level, and who spent 6 months being systematically told, in words and in practice, that she was less capable than the other child in the home. That's not sensitivity, that's a pattern. Yes, I said, that's what I documented. I'm classifying this as emotional neglect by differential treatment. I'll be recommending supervised contact. I exhaled. slowly, through my nose, the way I'd been trained to manage my breathing in situations that required me to stay steady. Thank you, Miss Jerome. The formal meeting was on a Monday. County Family Services office. Rectangular table, fluorescent lights, recording device in the center. My mother and Raymond on one side with their attorney, a careful man named Mr. Hicks. Me on the other side with Florence in her dress uniform and 6 months of documentation in a manila folder. At the head of the table, Miss Jerome. She presented the findings without editorializing: grade report comparison, counselor documentation, behavioral observations from school staff, 12 weeks of weekly sessions with a child who had stopped believing she was capable. Photographic evidence showing consistent inclusion of one child in activities and consistent exclusion of the other. My mother's written dismissal of the school counselor's formal recommendation. Raymond tried to speak twice. Mr. Hicks put a hand on his arm each time. My mother looked at the table. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked older than she had the last time I'd seen her, and tired in the specific way of someone who has been carrying something heavy and has just been told they can put it down. Except putting it down means admitting it was there. Raymond finally spoke during a pause in the proceedings. I treated that girl the same as Marcus. I have high standards. I applied them to both children. Florence opened my folder and placed Destiny's grade report on the table. September scores beside February scores. Side by side. Mr. Watkins, both children were in your home for 6 months. One child's performance was stable across all subjects. The other child declined across all subjects over the same period. If the standards were equal, how do you account for that? He looked at the paper. His jaw moved. He didn't answer. Miss Jerome placed her own document on the table. Akefer's formal recommendation from November and my mother's email response. My mother saw it and her breath caught. Mrs. Watkins, you received a professional recommendation from a licensed school counselor, indicating that your granddaughter was internalizing messaging about her capabilities and requesting a family environment evaluation. You responded that she was adjusting. Can you tell me why you didn't act on that recommendation? My mother's eyes were wet. She looked at me across the table. I didn't want to make Raymond feel like he was being accused of something. The room was quiet. I kept my voice level. Mom, I didn't ask you to protect Raymond. I asked you to protect my daughter. She pressed her lips together. A tear ran down the left side of her face. She didn't wipe it. Florence placed the final item on the table. Destiny's list. The one with everything crossed out. And at the bottom, in small letters, is there anything? Mr. Hicks looked at it. Then he looked at Raymond. Then he set his pen down. Raymond stared at the list for a long moment. His expression shifted slowly through something I couldn't name precisely. Not guilt exactly. Closer to recognition. The face of someone who has just understood the distance between what they intended and what they built. He didn't speak. Miss Jerome delivered the findings. Substantiated report of emotional neglect by differential treatment. Recommendation: no unsupervised contact with either child pending comprehensive review. All future contact with Destiny and Marcus to occur at a monitored family services facility. Bi-weekly sessions. 2 hours, social worker present. Florence confirmed. Family care plan officially revoked. Sole legal and physical custody confirmed with me, formalized through family court within 30 days. Raymond stood up. He pushed his chair back carefully, the way people do when they're managing themselves very deliberately, when the alternative is something they can't afford. He looked at me once. I waited. He nodded, a single small nod that I chose to interpret as an acknowledgement, and walked out. My mother stayed in her chair for an extra moment. She reached across the table toward my arm. Her fingers hovered over my sleeve without landing. Renee, I love those babies. I know you do, Mom. I didn't pull away, but I didn't close the gap either. That's why the schedule is in place. So you can keep loving them in a way that helps them. She pulled her hand back, stood slowly, followed Raymond out the door. Mr. Hicks gathered his papers. He paused at the door and said, to no one in particular, for what it's worth, those are well-documented cases. He left. Florence closed the folder. She looked at me. You all right? I'll be all right when I get to the kids. They were in the lobby. A paralegal from Florence's office, a young specialist named Rivera, had been with them. Destiny was reading. Marcus was drawing on a notepad Rivera had found him. He had drawn what appeared to be an elaborate rocket ship with extensive technical detail and several explosions that he seemed pleased about. Destiny looked up when she heard my footsteps in the hallway. She closed her book with her thumb still in the page. Is it done? It's done. She stood up. She didn't run. She walked to me steadily, the way she did everything, and stood in front of me and looked up. I held out the piece of paper I'd written in the hotel room, the one I'd put in my jacket pocket 3 days ago. She unfolded it, read it again. Her jaw moved slightly. She was holding her face very still in the way she did when she didn't want to cry in front of people. "You wrote this in the hotel?" she asked. "I wrote it after you called me." She folded it carefully along the original creases and put it in the front pocket of her backpack, right next to the military dependent ID. Marcus looked up from his rocket ship. "Are we going home now?" "We're going home." "Which home?" Destiny looked at me. "Ours," I said. "Our home. We're finding one together." Marcus put the notepad under his arm and stood up. "Can it have a yard?" "We'll do our best." "And can I have my own room?" "Absolutely." He started walking toward the door with the specific purposeful stride of a child who has just been told the answer to the most important question. Destiny fell into step beside me. She slipped her hand into mine. I felt the folded piece of paper shift slightly in her pocket as she walked, the list with everything crossed out, and underneath it now, the other list. The one I wrote for her. The one that started with telling the truth and ended with being exactly who you are in rooms that made that hard. We walked out into the afternoon sun. I didn't look back. 4 months later, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Fayetteville, 6 minutes from base. Destiny had the larger bedroom because she was older and she asked for it, and because asking for things is a skill I needed her to practice. Marcus had the smaller bedroom and a yard he shared with the downstairs neighbor's dog, who had decided Marcus was the most interesting person on the property. I had been reassigned to logistics coordination, stateside, no deployments for 14 months. My commanding officer signed the family stability order the same day I requested it. Family court finalized custody in May. Sole physical and legal custody with me. My mother and Raymond were granted supervised visitation every other Saturday at the Family Services Center. 2 hours, social worker present. Raymond came to the first session with a book about ecosystems. He set it on the table in front of Destiny and sat down across from her. She looked at the book, then she looked at him. "Wetlands?" she asked. "I thought you might know more about it than I do," he said. His voice was measured and careful and not unkind. She opened the book to the first chapter. They spent the 2 hours reading it together. She corrected him twice when he mispronounced scientific terms. He let her correct him. He didn't qualify it or redirect it. He just said, "Thank you," both times and kept reading. When the session ended, Raymond stood and said, "I'll see you in 2 weeks. Destiny said, "Okay." He left. The social worker wrote in her report that the interaction was positive. I read it on my phone in the parking lot while Destiny and Marcus ate the granola bars I'd brought. My mother attended every session. She brought food. She asked questions. She laughed at Marcus's stories. She hugged Destiny at the end of each visit, and Destiny, after the 3rd session, began hugging back. Progress isn't a straight line, but it is a line. Miss Briggs emailed me in June. The subject line was just Destiny. "I wanted you to know that she volunteered the answer to 4 questions in class today, all of them correct, and she didn't second-guess a single one. I thought you'd want to hear that." I read the email 3 times. Then I printed it and put it on the refrigerator. Destiny saw it that evening when she came in from school. She read it. She stood in front of the refrigerator for a long moment. Then she went to her room and came back with a fresh piece of paper. She sat at the kitchen table and wrote for about 10 minutes. Then she slid the paper across to me. A new list, things I am good at. Reading, not crossed out. Science, not crossed out. Telling the truth, not crossed out. Drawing, not crossed out. Knowing when something is wrong, not crossed out. Being my brother's sister, not crossed out. And at the bottom, in the same small letters as before, but this time without the question mark. There are things, I kept that list. I kept it in my breast pocket for a month, the way I'd kept her original one. Against my uniform, against my chest. Then I put it in the folder, not the documentation folder, a different one. The one I started after the CPS meeting, labeled with a single word. Evidence. Not of harm, of her. I used to think protecting my children meant making sure they were fed and housed and in school and supervised by adults who meant well. I was wrong. It meant making sure the adults who meant well understood that meaning well is not the same as doing right. That love without equity is just preference wearing a warmer coat. That a child who is never chosen will eventually stop raising her hand, and then stop believing she has answers, and then stop believing she belongs in the room at all. Destiny belonged in the room. She had always belonged in the room. It took 6 months of distance, documentation, and a green notebook full of exact words to prove it to the people who had forgotten. I came home with paperwork and a JAG officer, and a school counselor's file, and a list written in the hand of a 10-year-old who had crossed out everything she knew about herself. I came home and I said no. Those things stay on the list, all of them. Especially the ones someone told you to remove. That is my story. 2 kids, 1 invisible wall, and a mother who documented her way back to both of them. If this reminded you that the quiet harm is still harm, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.